Hello, welcome and good evening, and I have a short video because I got something very nice for an amazingly small amount of money. Before, in my retro PC, I was using a 286 based SUNTAC board. I think it was originally made by, or at least labeled with a peacock sticker, a German computer company, I think, from the 80s and 90s. But I think I fried it when I did one of the Gotek mods and plugged in the floppy in the incorrect polarity. I think it will still work if I replace the DRAM, but I don't know which of the many chips is broken, so I would probably need to test them first. So right now I'm working with the 386, which is nice, but I still hold a very warm spot in my heart for the 286s. Those are basically the first machines that I grew up with, and I think the 286 is a very nice design, although basically it has its flaws. It was the first with protected mode, being able to access more than 1 megabyte of memory. And I also love the baby 80s size boards like this one here, which are really tiny. They have a very low chip count. I already have an Octet board which blew one of the tantalum caps here when powering on, so they sometimes go bad and bad things can happen. And I recapped the board and it sort of works, but I didn't have the time to really debug it and see if it works. And almost all of these boards, since they are now approached the 30-year age, almost all of them have corrosion on them, because the CMOS batteries, they are nickel cadmium accus or batteries, and they leak. They leak all over the board. They are usually near the keyboard connector here, so the keyboard connector gets corroded, and all the power supply lines around here, sometimes the first few slots. And that's pretty ugly and sad, and it's hard to clean up, and sometimes you have broken traces. You have to run wires and stuff. But this one here, when I saw the pictures on eBay, it was perfect. The battery even was perfect. But after 30 years, because this will also be from like sometime 1990, 91 at latest, the battery will be dead anyway. So whenever you power this on and put a charge into the battery, it's prone to leakage. So the very first thing I did was desolder it. And yeah, let's take a look around the board, because I didn't power it on yet, so I don't know if it works, but visual inspection is perfect, as you will see. So I think it will work just fine. Let's zoom in, if possible. Yes, so this is where the battery was. And I took it off, and the only thing that you see here is mild residue from the hot glue that they used. But nothing, no corrosion. The board looks basically like out of the box almost. You see that there's a little bit of dust on this side here, on the edge connectors. So it was probably inside a PC. The other side doesn't show anything. Those are Foxconn connectors, by the way. So it probably was mounted in a tower, or the desktop was probably stored in a vertical position. Who knows? Yeah, so I desoldered this. There's an external battery connector, which is nice. The rightmost two pins are ground, the left one is plus. I already checked that after some hints from the Vogons forums, because tracing this is quite hard, because it goes here into a diode network, which is from the bottom quite complicated, to my eyes at least. But everything looks fine. So a bunch of diodes here, probably for power supply and stuff. I don't know, I have no clue. And the interesting parts start here with these two black chips. These are two of the three chips which basically drive the whole main board. This is a Texas Instruments chipset. I haven't seen many boards with this. Most of the baby AT fast main boards run a headland chip set, which can go up to 25 megahertz, which is really fast for 286. This one here supposedly goes to 16 megahertz, and this board in particular comes with an AMD 12 megahertz 286. And the best thing about this era is you see the AMD logo here, the old logo, and it says ATL 28612. So it's a 12 megahertz chip. Copyright Intel 1982. This was a time when AMD and Intel had cross-licensing. So AMD could build whatever CPU Intel was also building. Here's, by the way, the third chip of the chipset, which probably is DRAM access because it's located here and going around here to the DRAM sockets. I'll come to that in a minute. Yeah, so that's pretty interesting. Socketed here is the keyboard controller, which I think should be the keyboard controller. I haven't looked it up. You guys can look it up. It's a NEC D80C42, but I think 8042 is the keyboard controller. I think the RTC, the real-time clock, is probably in here. I think so. So this is probably the crystal driving the RTC in here, because everything, plus there's probably also CMOS for storing setup options in here. I presume this is all in this specialized chip. And this one here deals probably with the bus interface, from what you can see more or less here. Probably together with these two probably drive the bus interface, I guess, from the traces going over here to the ISO slots. Would be my guess, but I didn't find data sheets for these chips. If anyone finds them, please link it in the comments. Then of course the FPU 8287, still have that one. Might try it out as well. So there's a couple of standard logic chips here, nothing fancy. The 24 megahertz crystal, which probably by dividing the clock gives us the 12 megahertz for the CPU. Presumably you can probably replace it with a 32 megahertz to drive a 60 megahertz CPU, but I won't be trying that. That's too dangerous in my opinion. So here's the headers for the, let's turn it around. You can actually read it, hopefully. Can you? Yes, you probably can. A little bit of shifting. So reset header for the reset button, turbo button. Yeah, that's something you don't have on modern PCs. Turbo LED. Keyboard lock. This is also very 80s. You could lock your PC with a key. And a speaker. Yeah, this is most important, and the reset button. All the others are optional. The turbo switch maybe has to be shorted to keep it in permanent 12 megahertz and not clock down to 4.7 or 8 megahertz. I don't know what this will use. Probably, since it only has one crystal, I guess it will go down to 8 megahertz. Divide by 3 instead of 2. And then one of the most interesting parts is the RAM. So I bought this, and from the looks of it, and I found a little information about this board. This should be 1 megabyte of RAM. So these are the main RAM chips, and you can see again that these sockets here even take smaller. So these are like dual dip sockets. You can put in smaller chips here with one row less, and that will give you like probably 512K instead of 1 megabyte. But actually the other banks are only taking the bigger chips. And then these are 80 nanosecond chips. There's another row of 100 nanosecond chips, and this will be the parity chips. So nowadays you don't have parity usually, except for in service and error correction, I think. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe all modern DRAM also has parity, but definitely only service usually have like the error correction. But back in the day you would have a separate chip to install for parity, and you could even disable parity, which would still work, but you couldn't detect if there was a bit error or something. So having these is pretty nice. And they're actually slower, they are 100 nanoseconds. But supposedly this board works with 0 wait state, which means the CPU doesn't have to wait. Over here is the BIOS, the ROM, low and high. Also written here. Probably someone already dumped this. I'm not sure if it's AMI, Award or Phoenix BIOS. We'll see that when we power it on. And that's about it. So the overall chip count is something like 17 ICs, which is amazingly few for a board from that era. And it has an enormous amount of 8 ISA slots, which if I put it also into an ATX case, will not, you won't even be able to use all of those. So the cases back then had much more slots. But it doesn't matter. Some of the cards, like the XT IDE, they don't even need a slot. You can just put it in and, yeah, basically just a riser card for the additional BIOS. So that's fine. You can probably use 7 out of the 8 slots or something. Okay, so this is basically one of the very, very best boards that I've seen, at least from the visual shape. If it still works, it might make a very nice PC. And I'm almost thinking, right now I have the JS16 and the 386. If I were to build another machine, I would probably put it in the Adlib here, because it fits so nicely from the era. And maybe even I have an EGA card instead of a VGA, which would mean I can't play quite a bunch of games, but it will also fit the era nicely. And this is also such a beautiful card. Never tested it because I don't have any way to connect it to my VGA monitors. Don't know if you know it, but EGA is digital TTL output with, I think, 15 kilohertz, and VGA is basically 30 kilohertz, so all the LCDs and other stuff that takes VGA will not accept that video signal. Yeah, so that's a whole other problem. But there are converter boards. Maybe I'll take that up as well, but those cost money, and these things were so cheap. Yeah, basically, this one I have flying around for a year or something, because I didn't know back then that it was so hard to connect it. And yeah, this is German, it means without this sticker there will be no warranty, so I better leave it on there. Yeah, so very nice stuff indeed. Let me know what you think in the comments, and if you have any hints. Also interesting, I didn't mention, is besides the DIP sockets for the 1 megabyte, we have even so-called SIP sockets, where you could put in memory modules, and if I rip those DIP modules out and put in 4 1 megabyte modules, I would get 4 megabytes of RAM. And even better, I could desolder those things, because SIP memory is sometimes hard to come by. But there's also outline and holes for standard SIM sockets. So those you can actually still buy from a few vendors. You could desolder those and put in standard SIM sockets. But for the 286 and DOS games with EGA, you wouldn't even need to do that. You could leave it as is, because 1 megabyte of RAM is plenty. You don't want to run Windows on this. So that would be a nice project. So that's it for today. Hope you enjoyed it. Share, like, and most importantly subscribe. We are almost at 80 subscribers. That's awesome. Love it. See you next time.